See, people often would call me a chatty catty, and they would initially round down and believe that I'm high on some substance, which I'm typically not. In fact, what I would say that someone's behavior, in contrast with time, the more you experience, the more you know, and the more you feel emotionally, divided by the fact that nobody pays attention because they never get out and see things because they've always been so self-identified with attending to their own and achieving their own goals for their own plan. Uh, Divided by else again the time span and just the realization that we don't live here for a long time, and that many people who would be considered antisocial, at least in "don't talk to me," "why are you calling me," "why are you texting me," "just leave me alone," "send me a text," I don't want to hear a phone call. The more you experience and the more you see reality, and the more that it goes over people's heads. If many of you remembered me from as a child, although I've lived through terrible experiences, that made me a critical thinker immediately. So what you see rubs off on you. It changes you forever. It's something that you cannot leave it behind. It's when something is touched and it's touching you. And the deep introspection, or inspection of just the human condition, why any scripture was ever written, why symbols are symbols, and why people become tribalists instead of following what they're supposed to do. And holy hell, dude, you're about to lose some stuff right here. That dude has like, what's up, huh? It's more or less, you see a world that could solve itself for as long as people just sat down and thought about it. The problem with critical thinking, in terms of myself even, is that you become much like Icarus. You fly way too high, and when I'm talking about drugs or alcohol, I'm talking about that you think that that means high, but what I'm talking about here is thought, like the halo, or just the ding, the light goes off. You know, you're talking about flying to this magnanimous object which melts you, which someone who thinks too critically all the time, the side effect of thinking way too much is that it robs part of you because it robs your happiness. And you start beginning to say, why can't people just listen and figure out? But you know also that they don't know anything because they've never done anything really, except appease themselves. So the element of learning, once you step off onto this platform of trying to understand and you immerse yourself into these topics, and you realize that, oh my gosh, we actually do only have a very small time left on this earth, and that people, once their age gathers so much acuity, and their confidence and just becomes nothing, and so maybe a spouse dies and children leave to go and do what they do, they go searching for a partner, leave one clinging to another, no matter who it is. And you see that this is a social just evolution, and even the scripture is a social evolution of time and place, and just trying to explain things, but people take it way too serious or literal. And then you're in a nursing home one day, laying down, and you would do anything to go back to 2019 and answer a phone call. You would immediately go, everyone's dead. Everyone I'm familiar with is dead. Everyone. So this concept that when you see tragedy, I mean a lot of tragedy, and it makes you think, and you think about people not thinking, it can drive you absolutely what people would call insane. But their idea of insane is reflected upon what they consider average or normal. But you consider, once you stop and start critically thinking, you see that the average pursuit of oneself and greatness, and without paying attention to all the problems in the world. For example, this is why Atlas is carrying the world. This is why Jesus is in the garden carrying the sins of the world. And how did that story get told to that? They're connected to that. It's the same concept in philosophy. When people get alone and they lose everything they have, then they want a playback. So, most especially when I call people and they're offended, I feel terribly sorry for them. Because I have nothing but good things to say to you. Typically, it's either a joke. If it went over your head, I guess it did. And some people get offended by my jokes. But there's nothing wrong with trying to make people laugh. I mean, that's basically what all Scripture is talking about. It's a commandment to be joyful, to be happy. And the reason why, I mean, I know people who would sit and go, I'm not happy. Well, get out and see people. Create friendships. And understand that you're trying too hard to be joyful. And the only thing that joyfulness is that why it's being written down in the first place is that when you realize that all these things are just stories, and there's a certain segment of you that it just says, be joyful. And you understand that this is just like a second person infusion of the poet writing this in Scripture, and you understand that it's something that people are just trying to inject this common idea. That it's only a story for its time. It's Scripture. It's a mitzvah or something. And that you see that everything evolves. Scriptures, things like this. When you stop and see this, there's a great capacity for joy and happiness. Now, you can be joyful and happy in the moment, but it's because you're surrounded by things that you consider that you love. But there's a difference, a coefficient, just a factor here, that if your joyfulness is dependent upon all that is around you, so then it's a foundation built upon sand in concept. If you are dependent upon your own selfish desires to appease your joy and happiness, well, what happens is you continually go on like a rat in a cocaine maze, and you just keep pushing the red button of just gorging, and gorging yourself, gorging your own self-interest, and you realize that all Scripture and all philosophies are just trying to talk about this concept, and that the Scriptures aren't holy; they're just people like me taking the time to write it down. But due to like you think it's old, I know people who call it the Bible days. And then I'm like, aren't you considered in the Bible days still? I mean, just because the book ended, you think it's over? See, they're held to this concept of just compartmentalism, unknowingly, subconsciously. See, I've rambled on right now here, and people will go, he's lost his mind. Where's the proof of that? I do more things in a day than many people of you couldn't do. I somehow managed to not even get up and do a finger except talk and try to get people to understand things. And I have a house. My dog, my fish is fed. Lights are on. Water's on. Ain't nobody in trouble. And the things move on. So is that crazy? That I can still think this much and behave such way? And just keep it all up. Some would say, oh, he's a functional crazy person. How does that work out? Because I've seen more and you've seen less and I've thought more, I'm crazy? I would just posture that you could use this as a thought algorithm. Every prophet, in terms of concept of writing, any teacher, anyone ahead of their time, was laughed at. Bruno, Galileo, Einstein. Anyone who thought more. And it doesn't take much. It takes only knowing cause and effect. It only takes knowing that there are multiple dimensions of way things are. For example, Newtonian cause and effect. That you think that it applies to just average physics, but it applies to human behavior also. And Scripture talks about this. You can see that the main problem in everyone is they search for proof and identity. They need validation at all times. And that's why the Scriptures write this. Is that it's a very terrible thing to do. These people, for their time, are trying to flesh out these words. They wrote many books. But because people are tribalistic, they think that my book is the only book. And they don't see where it came from. And I know people who are very well educated who absolutely believe still in the literal story and don't see all the very telltale signs, because you can be educated and famous off of your product but still miss something. That's why I start reading some books and I just put them down. You know, like I have a friend named Gordon. Dude translated the Dead Sea Scrolls. And he's a Karaite Jew like me. And, well, I'm nothing anymore. I'm just a believer. That's it. But this guy really actually thinks that, anyways, okay. You can't, if you don't, here's the thing, you could be a great linguist, but not be a great understander. You can be very well skilled in translation, but you might not have any clue what it's, the moral behind the story. Like, I can read it, or you can read it, like children who read Puff the Magic Dragon don't know it's about something else. Or they see a story, and they see it just as a movie, and it's like a cinematic thing, but there's a deep story behind it. So you could be a translator, but that's your focus. That's your trade. That's your ability. That's your skill, because you are focused on being known for what you can do well. But you completely miss the whole story behind it. So it's a sad thing, that the more you peek into these scriptures and these philosophies written by anybody, you see that people stop and they worship all they know because of their shallow inspection. And if they loved and inspected more, they would see these things just as stories written by people. They would see that it's the common thing. Much like I'm making a video right now, because it's not parchment. I mean, hello, we're in 2019. It's not 1237 AD. BC, before Common Era. And I would be writing on a piece of paper right now. And one day somebody might find this message, much like everyone else found those messages. And then they put them in a book and said, this makes sense. We could use this to control people. Oh, wow. And for as long as they believe that this is real, we could control them. Any religion does that. Any mindset does that in terms of ideology. You or a group of people, no different. It all comes down to the same. It's all networking. Your emotions are tied to their emotions. Your emotions are recumbent upon their emotions. So, it's something that you can get old way ahead of your time. See, it's like people, like, for example, I'm going to use a heretic analogy here. My mother, no matter what time it was, in the winter, if you weren't wearing a coat, I don't care if it's 70 degrees right now, like it is in winter right now. It is 72 degrees right here in East Tennessee. She would say, why aren't you wearing a coat? I'm like, Mom, it's 72 degrees. I mean, I'm pretty sure that you dress for the weather. I mean, so there's a constant thinking, much like people who believe in Scripture take it too literal. They're like, it is winter, you must be wearing this, thus saith the Lord. Or any other weird law like that, any other weird concept that people they're not logical or practical. And it really will kill you. I mean, they'll kill you. That's as exampled by Jesus Christ or Horus or anybody, Krishna, oh my God, any other person who was killed. I mean, when you attack people's mindset to make them think, you are in danger of being killed. Ask the character of Jesus. Ask anyone who died for their message. I hate to sound Machiavellian here, but it's just basic logic. It would be that any prophet, in terms of consideration, who does not actually bring a physical sword, not the metaphorical sword of mouth or tongue, a message, but an actual sword, for example, maybe Muhammad or somebody like that. But they're kind of often saying, this is the last religion ever, and if you don't, and we don't have a caliphate, everyone's going to die, and you must be like this. The problem with inserting totalitarianism or just global authoritarianism by means of is that you will always create a rebel. So there's no utopia. I mean, talk to Noah and Ham about this. Read it. It's not just a chronological event in your freaking noggin, the way you see it. Invest more time into understanding what the words are. See the very deep story. Ham is Canaan, and they're only worried about his drunk dad because they're worried about these superficial things. They're worried about the outside of the cup instead of the inside. I can rant on forever. And the only reason why you don't listen to me is because I'm not famous. Because you know what? I don't give two craps about being famous. What good does it serve me if I gain all this? What, am I going to be happy then? Nope. Am I going to be happy now? Nope. What I want is my dog, preferably a woman, hug some children, bounce them on my knee, and just die one day. That's it, practically. That's all I would like to do. It's, that's it. But apparently, and I don't want to hear about your religious beliefs. I don't want to, oh my God, we got to start over. We got to start all over. Oh my God, you will spoil the moment for me. Please, I'll do anything for you. I will stop anything. But when people look at you and they judge you based upon your appearance and be like, that's fixable, that's fixable, that's fixable. People are so superficial. It's like the story like in China. The dude sues his wife because their child is ugly, right? Because his DNA, or her DNA, she had plastic surgery to like fix her. I mean, she was really god-awful. In terms of consideration, she's god-awful because she's searching for beauty in the first place. She's vain. And, well, she's just ugly by symmetrical standards. So he sues her because she had plastic surgery to change her appearance. So we're talking about a thought algorithm right here. So people always strive to appear something that they're not. Okay? It's like when an actor comes out on stage, he must take a role. This is why we talk about the million masks of God. Like that, you must, in this concept, you can't let them know exactly who you are. You must have a facade. You must have a projection, a character. Because once people are a character, you don't judge them. Oh, it's just an act, you would say. But if you do the same thing as yourself, as the actor, then people will be very concerned with you. So I could say right now that I could set the stage for you and say, I'm completely wasted drunk. And you'd be like, oh, I get it, what he's saying. But then if I said, I'm completely sober, you would look at it differently. And go, wow, this guy could be crazy. So, in one part, you could say, it's genius. If you consider me sober. And then you would say, it's craziness if you considered me drunk. And just being myself. That's the problem with people. That's why in Scripture it talks about, it's not meaning, when Paul is talking about appear better for your betters and stuff, do nothing that they can just use against you. Give the devils no foothold. All these, the devil is basically any religious-minded person. And he's talking to clerics. He's not talking to laymen. He's talking, these people will judge you and take you to town for any reason, so you must appear blameless to these people. He's not telling the layman to appear like blameless. This is where the concept in Catholicism comes from, having a father and talking. It's just a reflection of confessing sins, and it's just a bunch of just imagery in words to make you believe that you're absolved from sins. Using the same reflection of, Father, forgive them for the, it's the same thing. Too bad nobody can. If you really love God, or if you really love the great mystery of just reality, don't you think, like if you loved a partner, wouldn't you want to know all about them? Wouldn't you search? Wouldn't you realize that just we're all humans? Wouldn't you stop being tribal and racist and stop being bought and sold by politics and people who wish for high power and high places? The high mindset, they're greedy. They want power. Can you not see that you're being used, bought, and sold? So yeah, the reason why I'm a little bit in your eyes is because I've seen way too much. And in Scripture they say, why are you being blind? It's a story. Why do you persecute me?